My name is Adam LZ. How would I identify myself? I'm a guy that likes cars that also happens to do YouTube and driving Formula Drift. It's funny, it feels like so long ago now, but what got me into drifting, I feel like, was being in the BMX world. A lot of the older riders that kind of dabbled with cars a little bit here and there started getting into drifting, and I would see it in my feed of like BMX riders that I followed. And it was one of those things that I kind of aspired to do, but never really knew the means to do it. When I moved to Florida, I met Taylor Ray. He kind of started introducing me to the drift scene. My friend Jimmy also started kind of getting involved in more so like the modified car community. And between both of them, that kind of gave me the push to get my first 240, which really just like dove me in headfirst into the drift community. Naming the ultimate drift chassis for me is kind of hard because there's like the seat time ultimate chassis, the competition ultimate chassis, the cost per dollar ultimate chassis. But I'd say overall, globally, if I could only drive one type of chassis, I'm just gonna say like E-chassis because man, E36 is great, but I just am not in love with how E36s look or like the body kits that are available. And I haven't really driven E46 enough to say that that's my ultimate drift chassis. So we're just gonna say E-chassis. Getting into drifting, my biggest influence, let's say outside of Taylor and Jimmy that kind of helped me get into the community, probably was Chelsea DeNofa. I can vividly remember watching on Instagram him do his backwards entry at Park, seeing that video and just thinking, man, this looks ridiculous. This is something that I'm going to do. I don't know how I'm gonna do it, but I'm gonna do it and I'm gonna do it this year. I feel like this isn't even a real question. Handbrake entry or Scandinavian flick? Of course, flick. Flick every time, all the time. The only time that I would see myself maybe not doing like a flick entry is if I'm following someone that I haven't followed a bunch and I need to put down a ball or chase. Sometimes it's a little bit safer to handbrake if you don't know the person in front of you is gonna do. But for style points, flick every time. I'd say probably my favorite track / event. Oh, actually, this is a tough one. Globally, like the track that I have a lot of seat time in that I think is my favorite event, whatever you want to call it, Ebisu North Course. For whatever reason, I can just drive North Course over and over again for a week, 2 weeks straight, just tandeming with friends, and it never gets old. Tire wear isn't terrible, it's technical, it's fast, it's scary. And the only other thing that I think even comes close to that is we got to drive Mount Gambier, which is like a privately closed down, but usually open to the public, volcanic crater park. So it's like we're street drifting with these sloping hills and corners. Luke Fink puts on an event, and it had to have been one of the most fun competitions I've driven and one of the coolest spots I've ever drifted in the world. What made me start YouTube? I guess like YouTube wasn't even a thing. Like there was no such thing as being a YouTuber. It kind of was like an Instagram video back in the day. And in high school, there was this older guy that would post like skate videos. And I thought it was so cool because I'd come into school and everyone would be talking about this guy's skate videos. So I asked for a camcorder for Christmas. I had to have been like probably like 12 or 13. And me and my buddy Cody, we'd just go out in the street and we'd try to do 180s, film them, put them up on YouTube. And there's like 3 people that would watch. And eventually that got to 10,000 people, and eventually here we are now, and it's hundreds of thousands of people. But yeah, it was just like kind of an outlet to share what we did, and it's turned into something much greater than that. I'm typically almost always a function over form guy, so I'm usually gonna be on the drift spec side of things instead of extreme low. And quite frankly, like my version of low, I can usually achieve with the drift spec and then still have the better performance of a longer shock and longer spring. So that's where I decide. One trend in drifting that I absolutely love that was not a thing when I started driving is it is now normal and cool for people to get into drifting and get a seat time car. When I started drifting, it was like 75 to 80% of people had a Project 240 in their garage that was just a money pit, and they never really got out to the track because they tried to build it with some crazy engine. It was unreliable, it broke, it cost them even more money. We're now like getting a 350Z, getting a E46, E36, Mustang, something that just works, and going and driving it in stock form and turning lap after lap is now just as cool, if not cooler, than having some 2JZ S13. I think too, there's more emphasis put on like driver skill maybe than back then, where when I started driving, it was more so focused on the car. So people are more proud of their driving rather than just being proud of their car, which I think is super cool. Every time I go to OSW, there's like people I've never even seen at the track before absolutely adoring each other that maybe just got into drifting, and that's super cool to see. What's next? Other than our world tour, we're going to Ireland pretty soon and a couple other countries to bring our fun all across the world. My goal and one thing that I always want to focus on is learning, both myself and as a shop. So it may be a new chassis, it may be a different type of build that we haven't done before, but stuff that just keeps it exciting. We built a lot of the same car, we built a lot of the same thing, and the whole reason I do this is because I love learning, I love the excitement of figuring something out and developing a new chassis, new car, whatever. New, there will always be a changing dynamic. Right now I'm wrenching on a Datsun from the 70s that is completely different than anything else I own, but I love it. I'm like diving headfirst into the rotary world, learning a bunch about that, and what's next? I don't know. If you're getting into drifting and you want some advice, going off what I said before, obviously focusing on seat time and getting something that gets you the maximum laps per dollar. Maybe it's not the coolest, maybe you hate 350Zs, but you'll probably get more laps and become a better driver because of it. And if you're at the point where you can't really afford to get a car, get out to the track and drive, I highly, highly recommend getting on a sim. You can have a lot of fun, sometimes just as much fun as driving the real track. Your cost per lap is virtually nothing. And then when you are able to get that car that you've been saving up for, you will probably be way better than anyone else that's getting into drifting. I've seen it time and time again, and I think it's really cool that now there is something realistic enough to where it translates to the real world and can make you a better driver on track and off track.